Hey everybody, Deathblade here. I'm also known as Jeremy Bai. I am an author and a translator who specializes in Chinese fantasy genres such as wuxia, xianxia, and shenhua. I'm coming at you today with a book review. The book in question is Dragons and Boxers. The author is Kyle Fiske. That might not be the correct way to pronounce your name, Kyle. If I mispronounced the name, I apologize. I probably should have asked ahead of time. Speaking of which, the author and I have interacted a little bit on Twitter. I wouldn't say that we really know each other deeply, but we have, exchanged tweets occasionally. So I'm putting that up there right from the beginning. My review is going to follow the same format as my reviews normally do. I'm going to do an assessment, a very brief non-spoiler summary. Then I'll talk about things that I liked and things that I didn't like. So first of all, getting to my assessment, I give it thumbs up and I thought it was really, really awesome. There is a slight caveat that I would say that there are certain aspects that some people might not be a huge fan of. That is that the main character is a Christian missionary in China in the early 20th century. So I know that there are some people who are not into that concept. I personally thought it was great, and it was very interesting for me to see those things portrayed in a relatively historically accurate way. But if you're the kind of person who doesn't like religious stuff, then you might not like it, because the main character is very religious, and his faith is an aspect of the story which is pretty important as he goes through his journey. Getting into the non-spoiler summary, as I already mentioned, the main character is a young man. He's a Westerner who goes to China as a missionary in the early 20th century. He gets wrapped up in the Boxer Rebellion events. If you're not a student of Chinese history, I don't want to go into too much detail about what the Boxer Rebellion was, but essentially it was an uprising in which traditional Chinese martial arts were used as an aspect of this rebellion against Western powers. I don't want to explain really what happens in the early part of the story. If you go to the Amazon description, you can read it for yourself. It's on the back of the novel as well. I didn't read that because I didn't, like, I knew I wanted to read this book from the moment when I heard about it. And so I was like, I don't want to know anything about it. And I didn't read the back of the novel. Because of that, I didn't really see what was, I shouldn't put it that way. I could see what was coming as the novel progressed. There's a very important incident which changes the main character's life. And it mentions it in the description, but I don't want to mention it. If you want to know about that, then you can go read it for yourself on the Amazon description or the back of the book. I do highly recommend this book. It's really cool, really fun. I really enjoyed it. It's about this young guy who gets involved in this historical, almost ancient China stuff, and I just really liked it. Getting into the stuff I liked and didn't like, as I already mentioned, I think just the mere setting is just fascinating. I personally am someone who really likes historical China and ancient China. I wouldn't say this is ancient China, because by the time of the Boxer Rebellion, China was kind of starting to modernize, and of course the Western powers were there mucking around with all sorts of things, and so it's not like Song, Tang, Ming, Qing dynasty stuff. The main character is a young Westerner who learns Chinese, becomes immersed in Chinese culture. That's something that I identify with, obviously. Also, he, starts to learn traditional Chinese martial arts, and he becomes very entrenched in Chinese culture, and that whole concept is really cool for me. It's not modern China that people are interested in. I mean, outside of academics and the news and stuff like that, I think what people are fascinated with and like is historical ancient China. I found that to be true as a manager working for a school in China. I interviewed a lot of people and I hired a lot of people. I mean, I didn't pay them, but I was in charge of the process of hiring them. And a lot of the people that came to China, they were thinking of and expecting to, see monks and meditation and Tai Chi and tea and like all that stuff. And that stuff isn't really what modern China is about. Given world events over the past few years, I'm sure more and more people are coming to realize that, but there is a big cultural misunderstanding about what China is like. And I think that the romantic China that people like is the one that existed centuries ago. And this book is kind of straddling that line between the ancient China and the modern world, and that whole aspect of the novel I think is really cool. The story is interesting. There's a little bit of romance. There's a lot of action and martial arts. So overall, it's a fun, exciting read, and you do get a lot of historical stuff. I learned a lot about the history of ancient China from reading Jin Yong novels, to be honest. Not that his novels are there to teach you about ancient history, but they got me interested in it. And when I found out that the characters in Jin Yong's novels, some of them were real historical figures, and that the events were related to real historical events, that led me into researching them more. And if you read Dragons and Boxers, you're going to be hearing a lot about real life events and circumstances that could lead you to studying that more if it sparks your interest. Talking about some of the things I didn't like, there are some language and translation choices that I didn't totally agree with, maybe in terms of romanization of some of the Chinese. But, that's just minor quibbles. And for the most part, I think the average person isn't going to even notice those. And so I have to mention it because it was something that kind of broke me out of the reading experience to some extent. But again, that's a very subjective thing that it has to do pretty much with just me. I felt that pacing wise, it got very slow in the middle. I felt that there was a lot of emphasis on training and different things that could have been tightened up a little bit. Again, that's just my personal opinion, but I did find it hard to get through some of the middle, maybe the third quarter or something like that. I found it dragging a little bit. That said, again, personal and subjective, I still think it's worth picking up. The final thing that I didn't like, it's kind of weird. I've actually thought about this a lot as I've considered re-recording this review. I don't know if I mentioned this because I've re-recorded this review a bunch of times now. Even today, I recorded the whole thing and then started over. But I actually did, if you look here on Amazon, the book came out on January 1st, 2020. I think I have this book on pre-order if it was on pre-order. Maybe I'm misremembering it, but I got the actual physical book shortly after it was released, and I read it shortly after I got it, and then I waited a little bit. I recorded a review video. I left the review video on the camera. I went back a month or two later to get it, to edit it, and it was gone. It had been deleted either by myself or my wife, and that kind of bummed me out, and it's taken me a really long time to get back around to re-recording this review. And in that intervening time, I've thought a lot about this one aspect that I'm going to put into my didn't like section, but it's kind of like, I don't know how to put it into words properly. But basically, the portrayal of Chinese martial arts I found in some ways to be something I didn't like. Now, don't get me wrong. First of all, the author has real life experience in martial arts, and it's written in a way that's very cool. But on the other hand, and also if you like, I can't remember if I mentioned this in this recording already or not, but basically, if you like martial arts and kung fu movies, and even wuxia movies to an extent, you will like this book because the fight scenes are exactly like what you would expect. But in some ways, that is kind of like something that I didn't like. I guess the reason is because the book is so grounded historically and is so realistic in so many ways that I found the sort of like cinematic portrayal of martial arts to be almost a little bit too unrealistic. Like when you're watching a kung fu movie, whether it's an old Shaw Brothers movie, a Jackie Chan movie, a Jet Li movie or something, it looks super, super awesome, but you know that that's not how fighting works in real life. It's just not. I mean, watch some MMA, watch some boxing or something. I mean, I've watched my fair share of those kind of things, whether it's on TV or like some Muay Thai matches in Thailand, and the choreographed smoothness of how martial artists are portrayed on screen is just not how it is in real life. And yet the martial artists in this book, in the fights, it comes across in that way. Like it's almost like it's choreographed. Like you can imagine it on the screen. It's so cool, all that stuff. And yet for me, to some extent, that seemed that broke the realism of the book. Like the book was super realistic in most aspects, and then that to me was a little bit unrealistic. Now, again, I've thought a lot about this, and I don't think I explained it in the perfect way, but you probably understand what I'm getting at. And I'm sure the author has thoughts about that as well. In the end, I think it's really a fun and good book. As you can see here on Amazon, it has 5-star average with 15 ratings. 15 ratings is not a huge amount. I mean, it shows you that there are people getting it and rating it and liking it. I wish it had more ratings, and I wish more people were reading it. If you're a person who is interested in Chinese culture, if you're interested in wuxia, if you're interested in martial arts, historical China, any one of those things, I would highly, highly recommend it. I will have a link in the description and the pinned comment. If you've read it, please leave your thoughts in the comments. If you have any questions or feedback, also, please leave your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of content. And again, check out Dragons and Boxers. It's a really fun read that I highly recommend. That's it for this video. I will see you next time. Godspeed.